I'm Jeff Fritz with SoundStage.com, and I'm joined today by Doug Schneider. He is the founder and publisher of SoundStage. Doug, how are you today?
Good, good. Just got back from California, actually.
Yeah, and that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. You were at an event that was hosted by Masimo Consumer,
Yeah,
formerly Sound United, and
yeah.
I know they unveiled some products there. And I wanted to, before we jump into the conversation, I wanted to kind of let the viewers know a little bit about Masimo Consumer. You may not be familiar with the name. You may not be familiar with the previous name, Sound United, but you're definitely familiar with the brands that they own. And just a partial list, if I can remember them all correctly, because there's quite a few. We have Bowers and Wilkins, Denon, Marantz, Polk Audio, Definitive Technology, Classé, and HEOS. Am I missing any, or is that
Yeah, I
everyone?
don't know if HEOS is a separate brand, but that's their thing and it spans a number of their products. Yeah,
So the event that you were in earlier in February or earlier in January was in San Diego, California. Tell us a
yeah.
little bit about what you saw and heard there.
Yeah, so formerly Sound United, now Masimo Consumer, their head office is in Carlsbad, which is just north of San Diego and right beside where we were staying, which was Oceanside, which is a really nice place. And the Carlsbad office is really big, spacious, and it's where they showcase everything. They don't make anything there, but they showcase it there. So they brought us there to see new products from Denon and Marantz, as well as a products that we can't talk about yet, but Marantz and Denon we can talk about. So it was to showcase, and they brought people there to do that.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of those people to me when we were discussing this earlier. I know there was Gary Dayton,
Yes,
Brendan Steed, and Joel Sistema. Can you tell us a little bit about those guys and what they do
yeah.
there, who
Joel,
they represent?
Joel and Gary are with Marantz. Joel is the president of Marantz, and Gary is, I guess, product manager. And then Brendan oversees all the product development for now the Masimo brands, including Denon and Marantz. So he's an engineer who oversees it all.
Now, Massimo Consumer, they are the parent company to these brands, and I think one of the things that people would be most curious about is the overlap with the brands. Now, I think with companies as diverse as, let's say, or distinct as Bowers and Wilkins and Polk Audio, I think
Yeah.
people probably assume there's very little overlap. But with companies like Denon and Marantz, and they inhabit some of the same space in consumer electronics, people may think that they're just rebranded, the same product rebranded for two different brands. I understand that's not the case. Can you tell us a little bit about the differentiation between specifically Denon and Marantz?
Yeah, so that was what was most interesting to me there because what they showed were primarily AV products. They had a new AV receiver from Denon called the A1H, which costs, I believe, in the US $6,500. And then they had processor and amp separates from Marantz, the AV10 and the AMP10, which each cost in the United States $9,000. Now, those are quite different products, but I have in the sense of you look at them, one's an all-in-one, one's separates. But internally, and that's a big question, and I've seen people say on forums they believe Marantz and Denon are the same under the hood. And this is something that came up here a couple months ago. Behind me is the Marantz 40N. And at around the same time, it came up here for photography and measurements, the Denon PMA 1700 NE. They were both reviewed by Dennis Berger. And I made a joke to Diego Estan, who does our measurements. I wonder if I'll take off the hood and it'll be a Ford Mercury thing where, only the grill is different because they're both priced about the same. They are both powered about the same, 70 watts, I believe, into 8 ohms, double that. So you would think that they're the same product. But when you take off the hood, they're not the same product at all. All the circuitry is different. Everything about them and the measurements are completely different. So they're two totally different products. And that's the same mainly with the AV products they showed. Very different architecture for Marantz, not just the separates versus an all-in-one, but the amplifier technology, the DAC technology, all different. Then they made a point, this is something I asked Brendan about, do these companies operate separately? And although they all operate out of the same facility in Japan, the teams are separate, and they have what they call sound masters, separate sound masters that guide each brand. So they are completely, in terms of the sound and that sort of thing, like I said, the DAC and the amplification, totally separate. Now there are some
Well,
overlap.
well, and that's interesting, and I think it would be something that fans of those brands would really like to hear because, Denon and Marantz, they're both very storied brands. They have a long history of tremendous products that span back decades and decades. And, you don't want to hear that a product is just rebranded and the engineering team is actually, works for another brand, so to speak. So the fact that those are distinct brands still today, even though it's in the AV space and we talk a lot about stereo sound, stereo hi-fi with SoundStage. It still gives the consumer, I think, some pride of ownership, if you
Yeah,
will, to know that Denon and Marantz are really still they're separate, unique products. Was that your sense of it
yeah,
after the
100%.
event?
100%. Now, there was some overlap in the sense of they both have the HEOS streaming platform. This is a Masimo thing, the HEOS thing. And some of the video circuitry is the same because they support both 4K and 8K processing, the processor parts. And you would expect those things to be the same because why would they kind of try to differentiate the video separately when the goals are 100% the same when you're projecting video? But when it comes to the audio side, completely different. And we didn't just have to take their word for it. They had all the products apart for us. And, the Marantz is a Class D topology on the amplification side. And I believe the Denon is a traditional Class A/B. The Marantz is a 16-channel power amplifier. The Denon is a 15-channel one. The DAC circuits are all different. When we measured the integrated amps, they look different as well. So anything that affects the sound, it's completely different. And you can see it physically when they lay the products out. And with what we've measured, they measure differently too. They have different goals. They're very different. Just like I said, the overlap seems to be on the streaming side, which you'd expect, and then on the video processing side.
Well, and I saw some of the internal pictures that you were able to take there, and these are AV products. Maybe you would think maybe the build quality isn't quite as impressive as what you see in some of the really upper end 2-channel products, but that's just not the case. The build quality looked absolutely fantastic. It was really, really impressive. And so yeah, well, thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. And I did remember, I think I was one brand off. It was Boston Acoustics. I think that's the 8th Masimo Consumer brand.
Boston Acoustics, and I don't think they're doing anything with Boston Acoustics now, but I made a joke when I was there. I'd like to see them revive some of those older Boston Acoustics designs.
Well, and including for those of us that were into car audio back 30 years ago, Boston Acoustics was right at the very pinnacle of car audio technology, particularly speaker separates. Everybody wanted a Boston Acoustics separate system in their car. Well, Doug, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it, and I would just let everyone know the SoundStage network, SoundStage social media. You'll see a bunch of the pictures that Doug took there. And just be on the lookout for more coverage coming up.
Yes, we have products that we can't talk about right now that were also shown there, coming probably to SoundStage Global in February. You'll be seeing an article and photos about them.
Fantastic. All right, Doug, thanks a lot for joining me, and I'll chat with you later.
Okay, thank you.